Good morning, everybody. Thank you for adjusting so graciously to our time change. I will start the introductions today so we can get rolling. I'm Karen Taylor, and I am Negotiations Chair for EM.
Jim McFarland, Vice President, EM.
Sarah Martin, Member Rights.
Cam Wingenbach, Business Services.
Ashley Evans, HR.
Kristen Damer, Assistant Superintendent.
Brandon Lennox, Superintendent.
Cassidy Bjorklund, School Board.
Christine Berg, President.
Julie Reno, Research Chair.
Michelle Dunn, Secretary.
Karen, any additions or changes to the minutes? Are we ready to sign those?
I think we're ready to sign.
Keep forgetting the lines, but yeah, if you need. It's warm in here too. How you doing, Ashley?
I'm still cold.
All right, we will get started if you are ready. Okay. So the first response we have today is to agree to and sign to the memorandum of understanding for class size limits, so we can start having those discussions. If here's a copy. No, it's not in the. I only printed 2 copies. And everyone should have a packet. We'll go through our packet now. So the first section of the packet is really a response to the conversation we had about outside experience. And we're making the proposal that we adjust the nurses, social workers, and psychologists language that we agreed to last session or last round in the last contract to identify some the ability to review anyone hired after a certain point for that extra credit. One of the concerns we've heard, and I think you've heard, is individuals who are hired immediately previous to that contract who did not have the eligibility to. So employees who are hired in 2020 or after and did not have this language applied to their placement may ask to review the placement. A maximum of 2 years may be applied for an adjusted step placement, and the request to review must be made prior to June 1st, 2026, and will be applied for the 25-27 master agreement. So it gives a little wiggle room to ask for that and gives some grace for the Human Resources Department to apply that. Article 45 and then Article 5 and Article 23 really together. And this is in response to some of the changes we made based on the statutory changes that we applied to 23-25. So keeping Article 45 ABE ECFE teachers really mainly intact, but make some changes to sick leave specific to so Section 7. Letter B, sick leave may be taken for personal illness or when it becomes necessary to be absent from work and provide care for immediate or extended family, which matches teacher language and meets the spirit of the law, and also referencing ESST in that section. In C, identifying, just the caveat as allowed by Minnesota and federal law. And I think really that is the only change. I know there's some discussion about basic compensation and looking in that schedule. And I think where our team would be open to creative adjustments to that, we do have to continue to be wary of those programs and the limited kind of funding and budgeting that go into making sure that they have staffing and can meet the needs of the individuals they serve, which is really unique to these two programs. Any questions about that one?
I just was gonna mention, just if people are looking at this, that the language that was struck under Section 7, letter B, is just a statutory reference that is no longer accurate. So it's not that anything is being taken away. It's just it's not valid anymore.
And in our rewrite last time, we missed that.
Yeah.
And so then Article 5 and Article 23, we had the MOU specific to Jumpstart. And part of the discussion there last year was, again, a very unique program. And so in all three of these programs, maintaining individual seniority lists, and also then here in Article 5, creating a Section 10 and then bumping the other sections down to identify duty hours for the preschool Jumpstart Day. This is language from the previous MOU. Adding a section under prep time about the mutually agreed upon teacher and supervisor. I know about that that has been discussed, but that's a starting point. And then Article 23 adds a section specific to ABE or to Jumpstart and ABE ECFE on how layoff and recall occur specific for those programs.
Jumpstart and
Yeah, it really references Article 45 as well. So it's preschool, Jumpstart, and ABE ECFE with a subdivision specific to Jumpstart and preschool, which was in the previous MOU, and just a reference in some division seniority layoff and recall for ABE ECFE is covered in Article 45. Questions about those? And so as we jump into the appendices, I think our team recognizes there may be some continued back and forth in these, and we bring them to you potentially understanding that there could be changes and there could be discussion on what those look like. But just as a starting point, from Appendix B, looking at some practice into extended contract and extended assignment. So the homeless liaison in particular is doing work outside of the school year historically just because of the type of work that's been done. So addressing that within Appendix B, as well as the special education coach facilitators who do some to get files and things up to date, which we became aware of and would rather have documented in this way as opposed to how it has been done, which is time clock. Not striking third-party billing, but just asking that we push it down so it becomes, so we have some room to work on what that may look like. It may not fit well in that top section anymore. And again, this is an open-ended conversation, and talking to the person who used to do some of that third-party billing, a couple of thoughts as we were talking. Whether the stipend increases or not, that's a different discussion, but talking about how to make sure that stipend is applied appropriately, which we already started. So a couple thoughts, what if we look by positional average, meaning if we know who does the most, that they're at 100% of the stipend, and we look at from that point on, how does that look for other groups who are doing still doing it. It is a part of the job. The expectation is that it's being done, but the reference to the stipend is showing, based on the amount really, or how that's being done, and we're recognizing that in this conversation. And or looking at almost a look back period where you're identifying, you might have the singular stipend, but if we're looking, for example, if you look at the amount of billing done between the start of school and December, and then you calculate based on how much billing has been done. Pat Sullivan and I talked a little bit yesterday about how there might be some value in that, not only to make sure they in their billing, but they're doing the billing if it's dependent. Regardless of how we do that, added a section on third-party billing requires confirmation of completion to the Human Resources Department. Put through the coordinator of third-party billing, or the person in charge of that language could look different. By December 15th and June 15th, prior to paying the stipend, which will be paid 2 times per year in a final paycheck in December and June. And part of stating that is, again, the Human Resources Department wouldn't be digging through that work. We would need confirmation from the person doing that work to say, yep, Karen's done her third-party billing. So no matter how the stipend looks, I think there's some room there, but wanted to just put something on the table. And today that's all we're presenting on Appendix B. Any questions on that one? Probably, but not right now.
The only thing that occurs to me is as part of that formula, it may also be important to take into account if there's supervision that's required. So sometimes people don't do the documentation themselves, but it's their license, their name. They have to go through and make sure it's acceptable. So,
Yes.
okay.
Yep. And truthfully, we may be in a point where we don't know how to separate that out. And maybe the most important thing is just to identify how we're making sure it's done before the stipend is being done, if that makes sense. So I think we have some options, but I think we also could be at a point where we're just like, we're not touching the stipend. We're going to take a couple of years to figure out how it's being turned in and how we address it. But just as trying to brainstorm some ways of maybe we could how we can handle that differently. Appendix C and D are together, of course, extracurricular salary schedule, as well as kind of how that has been done. That first section really is just strikeouts of a change of position. Note anything, these changes are not necessarily additions or changes based on the activity schedule. Adaptive, anything with an asterisk is where we found a discrepancy in what it has been paid, what it is approved of, and what it was on the schedule. So there's an asterisk beside those. Girls basketball coordinator, middle school, that got bumped down to an activity, which is more appropriate to where that position is as opposed to being attached to basketball. And then our new positions of FCCLA, FFA, and HOSA are added. Tournament competition. I think, as a team, we've talked about how there's part of the concern is when it gets paid and how it's confirmed. That's an administrative concern that I'm not sure language fixes necessarily, as this is one of the first times. Did we just add it last contract, the tournament competition? Yeah. But that second line in particular is quite confusing to how you figure it out. I think open to try to talk through that, but that's the initial as we present it today. And then adding to this section, teachers, coaches, and activities advisors and drivers. And I know there was a proposal on the table, or we know there's a proposal on the table specific to this. We just transferred the language over. We would still feel that it should be an hourly stipend and not significantly higher than our drivers are supposed to be, both for budget purposes and an equity to drivers. And I know you don't have to worry about equity for drivers, but when we look at that language and the intention of it, that's where we come from. I know you have presentations too on these, so you're just taking in what's coming next. And so we just put Article 17 and Appendix I back on the table today to discussion. Generally not in favor of 1.5 hours becoming 2 hours, partially because especially at the high school, not all of that time, some of that time is assigned time. So to add that into 2 hours, we understand why that's being asked, but we are, that is a proposal that we're not confirming today. And then compensatory leave. We don't have significant changes to the compensatory leave, and I know more discussion is coming. Looking at your agenda, it also might require more work beyond this initial presentation. But what the team is asking for is in 4B, removing that May 25th and just stating prior to the last contract day that has caused problems, concerns, conflict for both teachers and administratively. And then number 5, and that again may take some more working. The intention is that compensatory time isn't taken until it's been earned. What we've struggled with is I know I'll have enough compensatory time. September 1st, someone says, I know I'll have enough by February 8th, and they take the time and it's not there. And so we administratively really have to be to a point where it's there and in the system. And we can talk about how that gets there, but the intention will not be approved, if that makes sense. You have to have earned the time.
Just as a question, how often is the compensatory time? How often is that updated? Just to provide people with a timeline.
It's done once a month. So, say September's would be accrued by the 7th of October.
So if a person wanted to go February 8th and they finished their compensatory hours February 7th, would they be able to take that day, or do they have to wait until it's been processed?
It would have to be processed.
So they actually can't take that day until March.
Well, I think we didn't write that into the language right now, but I think that would be a preference.
For it to be in the system, because it's a ton of manual updates, like multiple times, sometimes per day.
Sure.
So it's a very manual process because it's not just in one system. It touches like 3 or 4 different systems.
I think priority though is that people don't have it, right? So what happens now? It's not even just that, hey, I've earned it February 7th and I want to take it February 8th. It's the intention of earning it. So I asked for 3 days off in September, assuming that I'll work compensatory time, and to get away from that practice as a whole until at minimum we've earned it. Because I think Ashley would tell you there are times they've gotten to February 8th and that time has already been used. Meaning I knew I was going to earn it, but I took it on January 1st instead of February 8th, and now I take a deduct. If that makes sense.
It does. I was kind of thinking of it the other way though, in terms of what if you knew you wanted a compensatory day and you put in a personal leave day to kind of as a placeholder because of the 5% rule, but then you've earned the day and you want to switch it.
We would like to get away from that practice because then, again, and I don't mean to sound repetitive on it, but it's going back into those systems again and adjusting time off balances, and it's a very manual process.
But you understand how a person,
Yes,
if they
I
need the
understand.
day and
Yep.
there's only 5% of the people who can from their building, that it's really important to be timely in getting the day reserved,
Yeah,
regardless of how.
I understand what you're saying. I get
And
it.
we respect the amount of time. We cannot roll over compensatory.
Mhm.
So if I have
I get it.
no, but if I have my 4 days,
Yep.
and so of personal leave,
Yep.
but I know that I want to do something next year,
Mhm.
and I take all of my days, but I do my compensatory time. I want to be able to swap it because I can't roll compensatory. I want to be able to roll my personal.
And this is
we
part of the
respect
discussion.
Yeah, but
like,
I'm just
it's not the final.
okay. That's good.
It's just far as like trying to present on the admin side what that looks like. So this isn't like final or anything.
Yeah, that's just administrative. We can have a conversation about what that looks like because that's not the intention. I mean, in reality, they're interchangeable. So we just need to make sure that you don't lose a personal day. Yeah. But really it becomes a personal day. So I think that would make it easier for Ashley and her team if we rolled it over and did it in a timely, so that when it rolled November from an October earning, that if they just rolled that into the personal day. The problem that we might run into though is if you're already at your limit, and that creates another issue.
Yeah.
That might be where you're getting.
Probably figuring out how the systems work
Yeah.
better together.
Yeah.
But we're just running into a lot of roadblocks along the way and trying to manage this part of it. So, and then the tracking of the trade time and whatnot, we need to work on some efficiencies there as well, as far as like when it's being earned and whatnot, and paid and whatnot.
In the grand scheme of things, it's all the same if we're rolling it into personal. So we want to make sure that, yeah, you're not penalized for that. That's not the intention.
This might be a ridiculous question from your perspective, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Um, would there be any advantage to updating the trade time, more than once a month? Like if you did it every 2 weeks, would that remove some of that work on the backside, or does it just create more work?
I would want to check in with my team first just to see what that would look like. It might create a little bit more, but it might not. So I would want to check with them before I speak on their behalf.
And then the other thing, just from a process standpoint, I don't know that we have an answer for it. But getting to a point where picking up the time isn't your admin assistant putting it into a Excel spreadsheet at some point would be great. And I know Ashley's having conversations with her team. We don't really have an answer for you on that, but that's just something to put out there. Human error.
That was going to be another question that I had is there a standardized procedure across the district for how that's recorded? It is. Okay.
There's an identified standard procedure.
Whether it's followed or not.
Yeah. Some people are better at procedures than others. But yes.
The goal would be to make it easy for since no one's missing out on because I know there's errors there.
Okay. Thank you. I need some processing time on all of that. So the first, I guess I should ask, did anybody have any questions before we? No? Okay. So Article 36, and I could have on the agenda put Article 6/Appendix G, because the idea was that we have that language that's confusing to people, and applies to very few. So the suggestion was to move that language to an appendices instead, and we are ready to TA that, but I don't have a document. So that we would agree to, we could TA that. Then the next item on our agenda is leave. And in response to, so it's leave for Articles 38, 39, and 41. And I had a couple of questions. So for Article 39 in leave, which refers to, as I recall, it's not in the packet. I'm just talking about this. It was a district proposal from last time. But in Article 39, sorry, it's the subdivision 5 under that is the school conference and activities leave. And what is in your proposal is pursuant to Minnesota 181-9412, employees are eligible for up to 16 hours annually of leave from work to attend an eligible child's school conferences and activities for each child within a 12-month period. And in our proposal, the definition of what made a child eligible was included. And I know that the statute is there, and what I'm going to say here is has more to do with maybe convenience than anything else. But I think if we do not have that definition included, you're going to get a lot of questions about it, and we're going to get a lot of questions about, like, well, my child is 19 but they're still in high school, are they eligible? Like those kinds of things. And so I just wanted to ask if they're, like, not everything from the statute, so not everything from our proposal, but just would there be opposition to just including that chunk so that people know what an eligible, what makes your child eligible, I guess, is kind of what that comes down to. And again, like, the statute is right there. I just think it would alleviate a lot of questions for both sides,
Okay.
if that makes sense. Okay. And then in Article 41, in your response, in our proposal, there was the suggestion of a longevity reward for people who had been teaching in the district for 10 years or longer to be granted an additional personal day and to be able to bank additional personal time over a series of years. And in your response, there was not any reference to that. And so I'm not sure how to counter. So
Yeah, I think, I believe when we talked about this, we presented this language and stated that we weren't interested in longevity.
okay.
And part of that, again, comes back to systems and how they manage. And if, I am unsure that the system can manage two different leave accruals. But that was presented intentionally with that not. And yes and no, but I don't know that I don't know that that changes depending on school systems as a whole, because we've got multiple different contracts, multiple different accruals, a pretty complex schedule. It's the nature of the complexity of all of the contracts. So
Again, I thoroughly respect that. I just want you to know. I do that, but I'm out to speak for myself. I'm in a little bit of a unique situation, I would say. I've been here, this is starting my 31st year. So I've gone through all the kids and the sickness. I've done whatever. I'm in a position right now where I have college aged kids who are, one of them is a D2 athlete. I would like to be able to go watch her play. And her meets are only on Mondays and Tuesdays. I can't control that. I don't have sick parents to take for. There are a lot of things I cannot take sick leave. I can't take ESST. There are a lot of things I can't do. And I've been here a long time, and this would be something that would be greatly appreciated for someone who stays here and isn't just leaving because I don't want to be here. It's because I want to go to, if my daughter was getting married and she wasn't here, I need the time. And I've been told deduct isn't really an option. So again, I respect something like that, but being told a computer is going to dictate me, I don't like that.
Anything else on? All right. Jim, going once, going twice. All right. So those two items were just general questions. Now we get to the actual packet that was handed out. And I'm going to apologize because we're going to start going through this, and I'm going to I'm going to put in some addendums. So it's not a quiz, but if you follow along, it'll be easier. Um, so we talked at one point in time about the possibility of combining the PLC MOU with the flex time MOU. So this, the first pages are an attempt to do that. And so you can see on this document that there's a part one that refers to professional learning community leadership, because we are kind of down to this being pretty specific to compensation for leadership. So I changed the title there. And then the timeline is just a matter of changed dates that are included. As far as responsibility, there's a change in letter B. It's to meet twice each year. And that is, so the changes in the responsibility portion came from teaching and learning and meeting together with coaches, most specifically at the elementary level, because that's where the PLC work has been most active and most urgent in preparing for intervention, study time. So the whole group only needs to get together twice a year as a PLC leadership group. And then letter E, the up to 3 days professional development, was at one time when the district was regularly sending a team of people to the Summer Institute, the PLC Summer Institute. And they suggested that that is not necessary any longer, so that language is removed. One day at their assigned site to organize and apply training to their site improvement, also struck because it goes together with item C. And then what is now item C is approximately 20 hours per year. And that again comes from the group that's working specifically with the elementaries. And in the feedback survey and the site visits, we had that the information that we had from members were that there was a lot more responsibility that was being asked of the PLC leaders in collection of data and et cetera. And then the responsibilities that are under that: understand PLC lead communication from teaching and learning. They need some time to look at that, be able to ask questions before the meetings take place, follow the PLC protocol, ensure rules are assigned for meetings, roles, not rules, that there be a note taker and a timekeeper and et cetera. And then meet as PLC leads twice each year, which is redundant because that's in item B also. Selection, that remained the same, didn't change. Then if you go to the next page, compensation for PLC leadership positions, that is largely the same. We had encouragement from the assistant superintendent with the change in roles to re-propose the $1,000 per position. And then I have, I guess it's a question. If you go back, I was looking on Appendix B. I don't see anything there about compensation for PLC leadership. And I think it probably is in that PLC alignment plan. But I had a request from Horizon East and Horizon West building administration to split. So there were 5-8 PLC groups for music, for special ed, and for Phi Ed. And because of coaching availability to support their work, the administration at Horizon East is proposing that their PLC early start be on Tuesday, And I believe West is sticking to Wednesday so that they're on the same schedule as the K4 schools. So the building leadership has proposed that there be separate PLC leadership for music, Phi Ed, and special ed. And yes, and I'm not quite sure where to make that change other than to talk about it here because I think it might be in that PLC alignment plan that it identifies the leadership by group. But that's not my document. So, but anyway, that was a request that came, and I can forward that email on to you if you would like that. And then I think the rest of the document, when you get to the second part, that is the portion of the memorandum of understanding that applies to designated flex PLC time. Since it is no longer up to individual members to choose. So it's designated. And then the language that's included there, what's underlined, the language that's in the flex proposal is the language that came from your proposal. It's just that I put the two of them together because of the links that are between them.
Okay.
And I included the attached schedule after the signature lines. So there's the one line together for this language will sunset before the tables that give the dates. If that makes sense. Any questions about the Oh, yes. EIS had a question because their schedule is a little bit different. Do you want to talk about that, Sarah?
I've just received a few questions from members who are just in the EIS group, wanting a little bit more specific understanding of when their designated time back is, and if it includes conferences, they're interested in if there's availability to do something different because it's so important for them to be at conferences, and that was a piece of what they were asking, and just making sure it was specific towards them as well.
So as the current language is written, people are special education people would be excused from conferences as trade time for their mandatory paperwork. And what the EIS team is saying is that because their work is different and because these are earliest learners and they're still managing their needs and et cetera, that they feel like it's really important for them to be at conferences. So I think what they're looking for is an alternative specific to them for when their trade time could be.
Okay, so I'm going to ask on behalf of the team because this is my wondering as we sit here on August 13th without recommendations in this presented document here that we're kind of on crunch time. So what out of the two asks that we have today about 5.8 in particular in EIS, what needs to be in this document before it's signed, in not knowing that we can get back together before school starts and some of these dates are dependent on signature?
Well, I think that the 5.8 that, as I said, I don't the compensation is identified in this MOU. And then what it says is that leadership will determine who the PLC leaders are and the grouping. So like ultimately we don't control that. It's administrative. It's really just the I guess for EIS, probably what we would be looking for is the possibility of Joelle identifying for people, this is when your comp time is going to be, and identifying it by a period in time. And there's no doubt in my mind that she understands the need for people to be at conferences. Like she knows that group more better than anybody else. But people are wanting, I think people just want an answer to when is our trade time going to be, because people want to make plans, and if they have access to the early outs, are they going to be able to leave? Because their schedule is just different from anyone else.
Okay.
So I think what it would take is just agreement with Joelle to work with them on establishing that as soon as possible so that people can plan. So I don't, maybe it's a matter of putting in a line that says that member rights and EM president will meet with Joelle and the reps from that program in order to identify an agreeable situation. And then I think what we probably need to do is prepare for that for next year, because it says in here that I think it's by July 15th, we'll have it figured out. So just to have that kind of in our heads that we need to include them as a specific group, that we have a plan set by July 15th of next year.
Yep.
Does that answer your question? Okay.
Karen, we're going to talk about what else we wanted struck in the 912 part about the PLC leadership.
Yep. Thank you. This is why we need a team, right? Okay. If we go back to the 912, the second bullet for 912 department chairs whose PLC members, okay, the first bullet. PLC leadership will share among all members of a PLC provided with collaborative meeting time. And then we would strike in their contract day, because now we're to extended time. And I miss doing that. So we would strike in their contract day because there's extended time. So it technically doesn't have to fall within the contract day. And then for the second bullet for 912 department chairs whose PLC members do not have collaborative meeting time in common, resulting in additional leadership responsibilities. Our question was, and maybe this isn't a question that you can answer immediately, but are there any longer people that fall in that group that are not named in that last bullet? And maybe we leave the language there just in case it comes up.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know that we would know that, but we'll try to connect with teaching and
Okay.
learning. Great.
But then what's also true is that my intent was to strike that whole second bullet. But then what we would want to do is amend that so that the compensation is equal to in the other categories. So it would be $1,000 per position rather than just having the $900 per position struck. It would be the $1,000 per position if there are, in fact, people that fall in that category. Then number 5 on that page, I struck the "this agreement will sunset" language from this particular part because it's all the way at the end for both. Then we go to the flex time PLC. And as I said, that is essentially the language that you had included. So thank you, President Berg, for that reminder. Anything else from the team? Okay. Next, we have the MOU for student behavior and teacher safety. And the first page is largely the same. If you go to item 5, which is on the next page, previously it read, "A summary of this data will be presented to staff monthly at each site via staff meeting or written communication. Written communication is struck mainly because written communication, when it was provided, was really difficult for people to interpret. There wasn't an opportunity for discussion, feedback, brainstorming ideas for how to improve it, um, different people who could participate, support the work, etc. So it is struck because the best work seemed to come from face-to-face meetings. And then I want to point out in also under number 5, I want to just place emphasis on the last sentence, which is incident documentation and reporting will include administrative actions for each identified student's behavior. And part of the name of this document is teacher safety. And when we as a team were having conversation and based on feedback that we received from members, it's not knowing what the action has been that often leads to people feeling unsafe. Like they don't know that an administrator has worked with a student, et cetera. And so just an emphasis on incident documentation and that the reporting will include administrative action for each identified student's behavior. I did have a conversation with Isaac Lundberg, who said because of the, is it called profiles? The add-on that there will be, that there's going to be a specific way that incidents will that are reported in the log as log entries will not carry over to be visible when in that new system. And so it's going to be important that incidents and responses are logged correctly so that when you look for information on a student using that new add-on, that it will be visible, it will be something that can be taken into consideration. So I have not been trained on that add-on, so I don't know what the exact information is, but he just indicated that administration might need some training to make sure that logging happens in the recording incidents and their response needs to be logged in the correct place so that it becomes part of longitudinal data, if that makes sense. And then in that last paragraph, there's information that's struck. Our new idea, I think we had some conversation at the table, like maybe we need to have the right people looking at the data. And so we have a student behavior committee that's recorded elsewhere as a committee in the contract. We'd like to add some specifics or propose some specifics that it's comprised of one district level administrator, one school board member, 3 administrators, one from each grade level band would be the idea, 5 teachers chosen by Education Moorhead, 2 parents, 2 7-12 students, and others as invited, because there may be, like maybe there's suddenly a lot of issues that are happening in the bathrooms and, per TikTok challenges or whatever. And so, maybe that would be a situation where Steve would be the right person to be at the table to talk through potential solutions, that sort of thing. And also, we know that it's really, really difficult sometimes to find parents who can commit to participation. And so, it's not required that there are 2 parents at the table for the conversation to happen, I guess, is kind of what we're saying. But we're also, parents, members of the community may have concerns, and sometimes the way that they perceive situations is different from those of us who are in the building, who are in the trenches, perceive the situation. So that just might be some good insight. And then we included 7-12 students for that same reason. Sometimes their perspective is very different from the educator perspective or the administrator perspective. And then the idea would be meet monthly, and to get started with that right away as the school year gets started. So meet by September 30th. And again, it'll be challenging to put that crew together, but really the strong message that we got from our membership is we've been collecting this data. What's happening? What's happening with it? And so really to get that committee going, to identify the locations or themes of concerns that are coming up based on that data, and then identify action steps and who's responsible for following through on those action steps, setting the date and time of the next meeting so that people know about it well ahead of time. And then as time goes on, starting meetings by talking about the results. Was the action step, did it work? Did it not work? Is it looking like it's getting better, et cetera? And then the committee meeting agenda and minutes would be shared by district administration at Meet and Confer, so that attempt to keep people informed, and then also with the whole school board membership, so that when members of the committee, or excuse me, members of the community contact them with questions and concerns, they have access to sort of the summary of that data and et cetera. So that's the proposal for the student behavior. And then we have our own Appendix B with the same sort of commentary about third-party billing. Obviously not a final thing. But summer school staff, again, contracted, that be increased to $44 an hour. And then the curriculum study increased to $39 and $195 for that 5-hour day. The continuing education committee members is on that same side, and that they receive a stipend of $200 per year. And from the co-chairs of that committee, just the relatively low expense for 2 people from each building to get $200 a year, and a recognition of how important it is for that work to be accomplished on a timely basis so that people can license on time, and acknowledgement of that connection. I'm sorry, I need us, if we can, to go back up to the table in Appendix B. Underneath instructional coach and literacy specialist, we wanted to propose that we add the AmeriCorps coordinator for both math and reading, that we add an extended contract for 2 weeks. Specifically, there's a lot of work that's happening now in August in preparation for the upcoming school year. And that has not, to our knowledge, been compensated. There's not compensation for the work that takes place. So that would probably be kind of similar to the special ed coaches and all right, team, did I miss anything? Okay. All right, then the next one is Appendix D, and we have just some changes as far as accuracy of naming organizations. So Math League replaces Math, Science Olympiad replaces Science Team. And then we both had FFA. Some other, 2 other groups that are not represented here that we believe have been approved as student activities are PAY, Philanthropy and Youth, and National Honor Society.
you would have National Honor Society, correct? I have to check on
On pay. Okay. Okay. And then the final page, last but not least, is a compensation proposal, which is pretty straightforward. A 4% for year one.
It's okay. Just, we're gonna go 17 into this. On the agenda.
I, yeah, I'm going to come back to it. Thank you. Thank you. Nope, I appreciate it. So compensation for year one, 25, 26, 4% increase to all cells on the salary schedule, and an increase of $100 per month, $1,200 a year for each member added to health insurance. And then year two, a 4% increase to all cells on the salary schedule. And I'm going to invite Julie.
So, in looking around the state at districts who have already settled, the closest to us in terms of FTEs, Mankato has 627 FTEs. This contract, we're negotiating for 592.35 FTEs, and they put 4.13% on their salary schedule. And the reason it's an odd number is they did some restructuring, and then the second year, 3.5%. And so, in looking across the state, right now, they were the closest to our demographic and number of FTEs. They also have very close in terms of salary schedule. This past year, our bottom right corner was 92,530, and theirs is 91,977. So really similar to us in a lot of ways.
Do they have a similar number of steps also?
They actually have fewer.
Okay.
They have 10 steps. They just have a longevity increment that we don't have, so it's a slightly different structure.
Okay.
But they actually have fewer steps.
Okay. And then the last thing is when we were having some conversation about Appendix I and some concerns and some feedback that's tends to be more specifically for elementary. Kristen, you had mentioned the possibility of President Berg and one of the member rights people and potentially some representatives from the different buildings, just having a sit down, kind of a problem solving conversation with elementary administration. And Christine and Sarah are both interested in that. If we can identify a date, they'll between building member rights advocates and reps in those buildings, they'll pull together a group to meet and problem solve, try to identify. And some of it, we acknowledge it might just be procedural because it seems to work better in some locations based on administrative support than it does at others. And if those are ideas that can be shared to make it easier across the board. So that's it.
Okay, so it's 10:30. I on behalf of our team, I think we probably have less time than we need to talk about everything today, but I know we have at least two things that I think potentially we could come to agreement on. One is Article 36, which we just need to print and sign.
Yep.
And the other, I would say, flex with maybe trying to figure out that 912 piece, which maybe doesn't matter as long as we have the language in there, as well as just making reference to EIS, identifying their time that potentially is ready for signature.
Yep. I think it's actually the 5, 6, 7, 8 that would be the level of concern about whether they're being broken into two or I think for 912 we just agreed that we'll just leave the language in there in case it applies to someone.
Mm.
So, but yeah, I agree if we can get the language in there. I my head is so full that I'm not even sure. I'm impressed that you can say we could probably sign these two things because I don't know that.
Well, one you already
some
agreed
time.
to, so I could go
Yep.
get it right now and sign, and we could just break. The concern I think that we mentioned from the flex time is that, without that,
Yep. It's difficult for people to start planning.
right.
Right. So I think if we can put in that clarifying language, I think that we would be really. I mean, I think technically we should really briefly meet as a team just to make sure, but quite likely could sign that today, and then go forward from there. I also should say that our leadership team is meeting on Thursday, and we'd like to hold off providing you with upcoming dates until after we get dates on the calendar for um, cabinet meetings and exec board meetings before we have those set so that we don't end up with. So once that group meets on Thursday, I'll send you some dates for September, October, November is kind of what we're hoping for, and really hope we don't have to use them, but just to provide those so that we can get some things on the calendar. But better if we wait until after our whole leadership team gets together on Thursday.
Okay. All right. So it's
So should we just plan to recess for 15 minutes back?
let's plan to recess. Yeah, I think as long as we're back in here by 10:50 at the latest. I don't know that there's further conversation, so I would even
Right.
say 10:55. We just have to, yeah.
'Kay.
But yeah, we'll work on 10:50 and we'll try to get teaching and learning down.
Okay, perfect.
The problem is 5.
The difference is that Japan minutes very, very, very $36. And things have improved slightly. But Tara wanted it to wait. You talked about this being worth, we negotiated the last, right? Wanted to keep.
So then my question, I'll speak behalf of the group, like just talking about department chairs and PLC leads and how it's looked different 7, 8, like I don't know how we address that in this document for a new leader coming in. So that might be our question.
So what I indicated is I think that is probably something I'm assuming that's something that's laid out in that linked document.
Okay.
The PLC plan, I think it's linked on the first page. And so that would be a decision that would need to be made and then added to that attached document so that it's accurate. And then I'm assuming that would also be information that needs to be communicated rather urgently to payroll so that if there are separate PLC leaders for 5, 6, and for 7, 8, that they each get appropriate compensation for that work that they're accepting.
Okay.
if that makes sense.
So for the purposes of this, if we left the grade levels as it was and just went back to K-8, 9, 12, as this had been adjusted, we recognize that it has to be adjusted in the alignment plan.
Correct.
So if you trust that this can either be reprinted or, because we had made that adjustment that I had emailed you about
Mhm.
or texted you about. And then the other thing on this memorandum is we just added a statement under flexible professional time, just noting that EIS needed to meet with early childhood leadership to identify alternative flex time in order to attend conferences by September, just so it gives them an opportunity to meet and have that conversation. So with that,
Uh,
if
Does that document indicate that there will be communication with EM so that we know that that agreement has been reached?
this does not say that, but I think there would be no concern with pulling someone into that meeting, and that
Okay.
would be communication with Jane
Okay.
and Ashley.
Okay, and Sally is usually pretty good at communicating, so that
So I'll
Should be
just let
true.
you put eyes on that.
okay.
And then the other is Article 36, which we didn't have copies of, but now we do. And that's the Article 36 Appendix G change.
I'm gonna give her the.
Oh, you want this part? I think I gave you an extra page. There's too many pages.
Yeah.
It's just the last one.
Just this one.
This one.
The signatures are actually above that. Okay, so that takes care of the EIS. Okay. So, and then I was sharing with the new members of the team that we typically, when we've had to do crossouts and et cetera, we, in the final draft, we indicate the final language. And so, any questions from the team? It addresses both of the issues. Okay.
August is going fast.
That is one of those words. Yep. We have to sign those.
Too many donuts.
Or somebody just enjoys life.
Well, actually, too many donuts. Pardon? And you ever have too many donuts? Yeah. No, so perfect thing.
I'm trying to remember used a long time ago, there was a children's book about, I think, I don't remember. The character was an animal that ate too many donuts and exploded.
That would be problematic.
I doubt it's a book that's around anymore.
And maybe find it.
Probably speaks to how old I am. Okay, so
Your meeting-
following our meeting on Thursday, I'll send you some dates, potential dates for September, October, and November. And
Okay.
anything else?
So.
Okay. Thanks, everybody.